What's up, world? Listen to the You Only podcast with Lo Jackson out here in Los Angeles, California. I just want to tell you guys there's more content coming. Tune in, like, subscribe, and let's get it.
You won't believe these two books, they cracked my world wide open.
You only listeners, in every story we explore, remember this. Beneath the noise of circumstance and the drama of personality, the quiet mechanics are always at work. The subtle breaths, beliefs, meanings, and micro decisions silently shape who we become in this series. Today on the You Only, we step into something different. Not just mindset, not just philosophy, but the body, the breath, the science of living strong, and the art of feeling alive. 2 books, 2 men, 2 lenses on the same truth. Outlive, The Science and Art of Longevity by Peter Attia. Breath, The New Science of a Lost Art by James Nestor. One teaches you how to die early, the other teaches you how to actually live. And together, they form a blueprint for transformation, physically, emotionally, and spiritually, everyone. The harsh truth about modern health. Let's begin with a statistic that should stop all of us cold, really. According to the CDC, nearly 60% of American adults have at least one chronic disease, and about 40% have 2 or more. Heart disease remains the lead cause of death worldwide. Type 2 diabetes has quadrupled globally since 1980. Dementia cases are projected to triple by 2050. Yet, here's what matters. Most of these diseases are lifestyle driven. That's where Peter Attia comes in. You only audience members, here's Peter Attia speaking about biohacking, the practice of using science, technology, and self-experimentation to optimize your physical and mental performance.
Why do I not have confidence in the biohacking your way to 120, 150, 180? I've heard all of these sorts of numbers. Because I don't think we have the tools to address the underlying aspects of the aging of biology that are relentlessly pushing us towards the end of our lives. There are some people out there claiming that they've got their aging clock and it shows that even though their birth certificate says they're 60, they're really 35. We could put some time into explaining why that's not correct. I spend a lot of time looking at this type of literature. I haven't seen many examples where there's a bigger mismatch between what is actually happening scientifically and what is being talked about in the press, on social media, on podcasts. And that chasm is enormous. In other words, what's really happening is like nowhere near the sci-fi that's being portrayed.
Peter Attia, Medicine 3.0. Peter Attia is not your average physician. A Stanford-trained surgeon, former competitive boxer, and a longevity specialist. He left traditional medicine because he saw something devastating. We treat disease too late, he says. In Outlive, Attia introduces the idea of Medicine 3.0, a proactive approach focused on extending health span, not just lifespan. Audience, here's Peter Attia, MD, on the marginal decade of our lives.
What I think people should fixate on is how do I not be really, really frail, both physically and cognitively in the last decade of my life, what I call the marginal decade. Because I think most people would rather live to 90 and die of a heart attack while swimming in the ocean, but being, otherwise in remarkable shape, than live to 120 and spend the last 30 years of that unable to do much. I don't know if I'm going to live till I'm 85 or 90 or 80 or whatever. I mean, I don't feel like I have as much control over that. I think there are some elements of bad luck that factor into that. What I feel like I have much more control over is when I'm in my marginal decade, can I still go for a ruck? Will I carry 80 pounds on said ruck? No way, but I might be able to carry 10 or 20.
I think that was pretty informative about our marginal years, you only fan members. And what I find crazy in the world is nobody really practices the Hippocratic Oath. And that's eliminating things that people are consuming in their mouth first before ever offering any kind of pills or medicine or anything, So Peter Attia asked a brutal but powerful question. What would you need to be physically capable of doing on the last decade of your life? Carry groceries at 80, play on the floor with grandchildren at 85, hike mountains at 70? Attia calls this the centenarian decathlon, training today for the life you want decades from now. And the science backs him. Fact, muscle is survival. After age 30, adults lose 3 to 8% of muscle mass per decade. Loss of muscle, sarcopenia, is strongly associated with mortality. Grip strength alone is a powerful predictor of longevity. Strength training reduces all-cause mortality risk by roughly 10 to 20%, combined with aerobic activity. That risk drops even further. This is not about aesthetics. This is about staying alive. Zone 2, the metabolic secret. Attia emphasizes something most people ignore. Zone 2 cardio. The moderate intensity where you can talk but not sing. Why? Because it improves mitochondrial efficiency, the tiny energy factory in your cells. Poor mitochondrial function is linked to diabetes, Alzheimer's, cardiovascular disease as well. And here's something most people don't realize. Your body's ability to use oxygen is one of the strongest predictors of longevity. People in the top 25% of this criteria for their age group live significantly longer than those in the bottom quartile. Oxygen is left, which brings us to James Nestor, the breath that changes everything. James Nestor is a journalist who traveled the world from pulmonary labs in the US to ancient yogic schools in India, asking one question: are we breathing wrong?
My name is James Nestor. I'm the author of Breath, The New Science of a Lost Art. And these are 5 ways to improve your breathing. Stop breathing through your mouth. So breathing through your mouth isn't going to kill you. It's going to allow you to get enough oxygen to survive, but just surviving is different from being healthy. So compensation is different from really celebrating in vibrant health. So the difference between the mouth and nose, there are numerous differences, but the main ones are the nose is the filter. This is our first line of defense for the body. The nose also heats up air, it pressurizes it, it moistens it, and it conditions it so that by the time that air gets to our lungs, we can extract about 20% more oxygen breathing through our nose than we can equivalent breaths through the mouth. And if you think that's not going to make a difference throughout the day, throughout your life, you're crazy. When you start looking at so many chronic ailments, from asthma to allergies to even anxiety, and how they are directly tied to the way in which you breathe, and oftentimes they are tied to how we tend to overbreathe, you start to understand that having that extra pressure and resistance in your breath is so essential to calming your body down, filtering that air, and allowing yourself to work at peak efficiency. And when we walk through the day, just for one, we're not filtering that air, but we're also taking in way too much air, which stresses the body out. So a lot of you breathing through your mouth right now may be thinking, this guy is crazy. I breathe through my mouth. Everyone I know breathes through their mouths. What is crazy is to look at 5,400 other mammals on the planet right now and look at how they're breathing. Dogs breathe through their mouths when they are thermoregulating to offload heat, but no other animal is an obligate mouth breather for a reason. It is terrible for our health. It affects how your face will look. It makes you more susceptible to periodontal disease. It creates hyperventilation. It can stress you out. I can give you a whole laundry list of problems associated with it. The science is very clear. Don't breathe through your mouth. Breathe through your nose as often as you can.
In Breath, he documents a radical experiment. He blocked his nose and breathed only through his mouth for 10 days under medical supervision, everybody. The result? His blood pressure rose, his stress hormones spiked. He developed sleep apnea symptoms. His heart rate variability plummeted. Within days of returning to nasal breathing, everything improved. One small shift, massive psychological change. Audience, here's James Nestor again. on breathing through your nose.
Use your nose. So if you were to take an x-ray of your head, which is something I've done, you would notice something at the front of your face. You would notice that we have all of these crazy structures right at the front of our face. These structures take up the equivalent space of a billiard ball. If you could just imagine putting a billiard ball in the middle of your head. Those structures aren't there randomly. When we breathe air through our nose, we're forcing this air through a gauntlet of different passageways where that air is purified and where that air is heated and pressurized. Sea animals that live in shells use their shells to keep out invaders, to keep themselves safe. We use our noses to do the exact same thing.
Massive physiological change. The science of breathing. On average, a healthy adult takes between 7.5 million and 8.4 million breaths per year. Yet most of us do it poorly. Research shows that slow breathing around 5 to 6 breaths per minute stimulates the vagus nerve. And that's the longest nerve in your cranium, increasing parasympathetic activity, the rest and digest state. And that's what we're trying to reach. This lowers anxiety, improves heart rate variability, reduces inflammation. Chronic stress elevates cortisol. Elevated cortisol contributes to abnormal fat storage, immune suppression, and mood disorders. Breath is a lever into the nervous system. James Nestor on how we should slow down, audience.
Slow down. Inhaling and exhaling slowly have numerous benefits. One of those benefits is you are sending signals to your brain that you're in a calm state. So about 80% of the messages between the brain and the body come from the body to the brain. So if you are hunched over and stressed out and you're breathing like this, you are sending your brain alarm signals that there is a problem, that you need to be ready to fight or run away from something. You're also unleashing all these different hormones and adrenaline to allow you to be awake and alert. Well, we don't need to be awake and alert all the time during the day. That leads to chronic inflammation and so many other issues. So by breathing slowly, you can take over these systems. You can control your nervous system in many ways to send your brain signals that you are relaxed and in a safe place. And when you do that, the rest of the body and the brain respond.
As psychologist Carl Jung once said, "Who looks outside dreams, who looks inside awakes." Breath forces us inside. From a clinical psychology standpoint, here's what's powerful. Regulated breathing is foundational in trauma therapy. Modalities like somatic experiencing and EMDR emphasize body awareness before cognitive reframing. Audience, I wanted to share Dr. Peter Levine's take on somatic therapy. Listen in.
Somatic experiencing is not about getting the trauma or getting the trauma out or reliving the trauma. It's definitely not about that. But to change how it becomes stuck in the body. So instead of feeling gut wrench, we can feel an openness and spaciousness and warmth in the belly. And then maybe to look back at the images that might be coming up or thoughts that are coming up. But the key, again, is really the living, sensing, knowing body. And that's the term somatic experiencing, the name of the method, which means it's the experience of the living body, of the soma, not just of the anatomical, but of the living.
Exercise rivals antidepressants. Studies show moderate exercise 3 to 5 times weekly can be as effective as serotonin reuptake inhibitors, or SSRIs, for mild to moderate depression. Strength training improves self-efficiency. When clients feel physically stronger, their psychological resilience increases. VO2 max correlates with stress resilience. Better oxygen utilization supports emotional regulation under pressure. You Only fan members, here's holistic psychologist Dr. Nicole Apira. She was featured in our last episode, The World Appears Within You.
to tell people to do this, but if you hold your breath and put your face in a bowl full of cold water, your body responds as if you're diving. And what that means is that your heart rate slows down, your blood vessels in your extremities constrict because, your fingers will be okay with a little bit less oxygen, but your brain really needs that oxygen. So it's keeping the blood central where you need it the most. And then your spleen contracts. And so the spleen certainly wasn't the first organ that I thought about when thinking about diving, but the spleen is a reservoir. I mean, the spleen does many things, but one of the things that it does is it's a reservoir for red blood cells that are carrying oxygen. And so through that contraction, those oxygen-rich red blood cells are now pushed into circulation, and you get an oxygen boost.
How significant is that oxygen boost?
It's about 10% in most of us.
That's pretty impressive.
Exactly. Yeah. It's enough to make a difference.
Body and mind are inseparable. As Attia focuses on metabolic health, Nestor focuses on oxygen. And together they show that depression, anxiety, and burnout are not just mental, they are physiological states. Real-world events. During the COVID-19 pandemic, individuals with metabolic syndrome were significantly more vulnerable to severe outcomes. Obesity, diabetes, and cardiovascular diseases were major risk factors. And what supports metabolic health? Muscle mass, aerobic conditioning, stress regulation. Breathwork programs are now used in high-stress professions, military, first responders, elite athletes, because controlled breathing improves performance under pressure. Navy SEALs use box breathing. Olympic athletes use CO2 tolerance. Therapists teach diaphragmatic breathing to panic disorder patients. These are not fringe practices, they are survival tools. How the books intertwine here. Attia tells us, train for the long-term gain. Lift heavy, build mitochondria. Track your biomarkers, prioritize sleep. Nestor tells us, slow down your breathing. Breathe through your nose. Chew thoroughly. Reclaim lost biological wisdom. Both books say something radical. Your body already knows how to heal if you stop sabotaging it. Attia focuses on the macro, decades of health span. Nestor focuses on micro, each inhale and exhale. One works on structure, the other works on rhythm. Structure plus rhythm equals vitality. Direct practices for listeners, and that's you. From a psychologist standpoint, here's a daily protocol combining both books. Morning, 10-minute zone. 2 movement, fast, walk, or cycle. 5 minutes, slow nasal breathing. Practice one of the top 5 breath techniques. Diaphragmatic belly breathing. Place one hand on your chest and the other on your belly. Inhale deeply through your nose, ensuring that your belly is rising. Then exhale slowly through your pursed lips, allowing the stomach to fall. Cyclic sighing. Stanford method. Focus on slow inhale through the nose, followed by a second, shorter inhale to fully fill the lungs, and then a long, slow exhale through the mouth. Repeat for 5 minutes to reduce anxiety. And any time that you're in a situation where your amygdala is being sparked and you feel like you're fearful, if you practice that method right there, it tells the brain that you're falling asleep, so it relaxes when somebody's screaming or yelling or trying to start a fight with you. Also, there's the 4-7-8 breathing method. Inhale through your nose for a count of 4. Hold your breath for 7 seconds and exhale completely through your mouth with a whoosh sound for 8 seconds. Also, this is another technique. Alternate nostril breathing. Annulum vilum is what it's called. Gently close your right nostril with your thumb and inhale through the left. Then close the left nostril with your ring finger and exhale through the right. Reverse this process for 5 minutes in a cycle. These tips I have given you here, they benefit stress reduction. Consistent daily practice can significantly lower cortisol levels. Physical health studies indicate 5 minutes of daily breathing exercises can lower blood pressure as effectively as or better than medication or aerobic exercise. Consistency. Set a dedicated time, such as in the morning or before bed, to make it a habit. Write that in your journal. Tips. If sitting still is difficult, focus on feeling your belly expand and contract to stay present. Light exposure within 30 minutes of waking. 3 times per week. Progressive strength training. Focus on compound lifts. Daily mental hygiene. 5-minute body scan meditation. Replace mouth breathing with nasal breathing. End the day with gratitude journaling shown to improve subjective well-being. Weekly, one long, slow aerobic session, 45 to 60 minutes, one challenging VO2 max interval session. These are not trends, they are biological fundamentals. The deeper message. As we come to a close, and we bring this home, clear, simply, powerfully. In Outlive, Peter Attia teaches us that the future of our lives is built in the small decisions we make daily. He shows us that strength is insurance, that muscle is medicine, and that aerobic capacity is really freedom. He reminds us that we are not preparing for next week, we are preparing for the final decades of our lives. He asks us to think long term, to train with intention, and to live deliberately. In Breath, James Nestor pulls us into something even more immediate. He reminds us before we lift a weight, before we run a mile, before we chase longevity, we must learn how to breathe. Because breath is the gateway. It is the regulator of stress. It is the rhythm beneath every heartbeat. It is the quiet force that determines whether we live in tension or in balance. One book stretches your vision forward, decades ahead. The other pulls you inward into the very moment. Together they tell one unified truth. You cannot separate longevity from presence. You cannot separate strength from calm. And you cannot separate the body from the mind. You only audience members, here's Peter Attia.
Quality of our life is not determined by the first decade or second decade of our life. In other words, when I see people whose final decade is filled with suffering, in some capacity, it could be physical suffering, it could be cognitive suffering, it could be emotional suffering. So you could take someone who's in perfectly great health, but they've lived such a miserable life that they spend the last decade of their life alone because they don't have anybody that they love and nobody wants to be around them. To me, that's a bad marginal decade. You take an individual who's never looked after themselves physically, maybe they have their cognition all about them, but they can't do anything. They're in so much pain, or they can't be mobile. To me, that's a suboptimal marginal decade. If we could target making the marginal decade better, all the decades that come before it by necessity have to be good. You can't just wake up one day at 86 and say the next 10 years are going to be amazing if they're not already really amazing at 86, which means they were very good at 76 and 66, etc.
Attia builds the structure, Nestor restores the rhythm. And when structure and rhythm work together, health becomes more than survival. It becomes vitality. This is not about chasing perfection. It is about reclaiming responsibility. It is about realizing that healing is not hidden in some distant breakthrough. It is hidden in the basics. Lift, walk, breathe, sleep, repeat. And something extraordinary begins to happen. Energy returns, clarity sharpens, confidence grows, hope strengthens. Not because life got easier, but because you got stronger. If tonight sparked something in you, if you felt that quiet internal shift that says, I'm ready to take better care of myself, then say with us, because this journey on the You Only is not about information, it's about transformation. We are going to keep exploring the science of vitality, the psychology of resilience, the spiritual depth of discipline, and the real practices that help men and women build lives they are proud of inside and out. Your body is listening. Your nervous system is adaptive. Your future is forming. And every episode that we release is another tool for you to become strongest, calmest, most alive version of yourself. So take one slow breath right now. Feel your lungs expand. Feel your body settle. This is where longevity meets presence. This is where discipline meets peace. This is where your new chapter begins. And we are just getting started.
Warmest message from a You Only fan member. To the tired father, to the overwhelmed mother, to the man battling silent anxiety, to the woman exhausted from carrying everything. Your healing does not require a miracle. It requires consistency. Lift something heavy, walk a little further, breathe a little slower, sleep a little deeper, forgive yourself a little quicker. Your body is not broken, it is adaptive. And when you treat it with respect, When you move it, fuel it, oxygenate it, it responds with loyalty. You were not designed just to survive. You were designed to thrive. And it begins tonight with one deep, slow breath.